All right, joining me is Alex Golden, who's the host of the Setting the Pace podcast, a podcast covering the Indiana Pacers. And Alex, disappointing in-season tournament loss there on Saturday night. Did get a win the other night against Detroit, who's probably one of the worst teams in the NBA. But the Pacers right now have a team that is led by a young player in Tyrese Haliburton, a lot of other young pieces. Even though disappointing loss the in-season tournament, this has to be one of the better, more optimistic starts for the Pacers since like 2012, maybe, right?
Yeah, maybe the 17-18 season. You have to go back when they got Victor Oladipo. That season really worked out pretty well for them. But yeah, this has been a fun run. Tyrese Haliburton has kind of just catapulted the entire Pacers rebuild and just said, okay, we're going to go ahead and be a team that's able to win now and like getting to the championship game. I never would have imagined that starting out the year, just knowing who was on the roster and the group they were in and the teams they'd have to beat to get there. But, you call it disappointing that they lost the game. Yeah, I agree with you. But still, the fact that they got there, pretty impressive.
Exactly. I was going through some like history of the Indiana Pacers. So if you go all the way back, it's an ABA team. They're an ABA expansion team, and then they kind of have like a weird, rough '80s. And the Pacers are kind of one of those franchises too that's they've never really gotten like the heights of like a team where it's like they won one title or something, made the finals once. Um, but they also aren't like ever bad enough where they get to like really hit a home run in the lottery. Like there's two times in the '80s you guys uh, got second in the draft, the Ralph Sampson draft, and then 2 years later got second in the Patrick Ewing draft. So you just can't. Seems like you barely miss out on some of this stuff. You had those Reggie Miller years, and if you kind of look like the really foundational pieces for the Pacers, over their history, it's had to be guys that they like find a little bit later in the lottery, like a Paul George, or guys that you get from a trade, like you just mentioned, Victor Oladipo, now Tyrese Haliburton. Like, I really don't know where I'm going with this, but it just has to be amazing of all of the things that happened over the last like 3 years from 2020 to Haliburton getting traded to the Pacers for the Pacers to actually just kind of luck into like a guy that could be a face of the franchise for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with Paul George requesting the trade back in 17-18. He said at the beginning of 2017, that season there, he said, trade me in the offseason. And they basically were like, okay, we will. And then they traded him for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. And everybody was like, that's all they got for Paul George? What a terrible trade. Well, Victor Oladipo becomes a two-time All-Star. Domantas Sabonis becomes a two-time All-Star. You end up flipping Domantas Sabonis and getting Tyrese Haliburton. So if that trade request never happens, the Pacers never get Tyrese Haliburton, who I think at this point in his career will end up passing Paul George in terms of greatest Pacers of all time, even talent-wise and what they mean to the franchise. I mean, the franchise is 1,000% bought into Tyrese Haliburton. He has basically been given the opportunity to kind of play a role a little bit with the front office in terms of giving his opinion on guys they should go out and get. He helped recruit Bruce Brown there. He goes to some of their draft, parties, not parties, but draft workouts, I should say, to kind of see like what players he likes and what he thinks about them. So it's quite crazy, but you're right. They did have a rough stretch there when they did come into the league in the 80s. They were just really poor and they were trying to figure things out. They did a telethon to save the team at one point. Slick Leonard, which was he recently passed away a couple of years ago. He was a great coach, and he was the one that won 529 games in his Pacers career, won 3 ABA championships with them. He was a huge staple of that franchise, and so just being able to figure things out like the 80s, man, like even aside from the Pacers picks that they had, they traded away the pick that became Michael Jordan. The year the Blazers won the draft, when they got I forget, it was Brad Daugherty, maybe like was that, or who was it? I can't remember now. I think Brad Daugherty went to the Cavs. It might have been Sam Bowie. I can't remember. Whoever was drafted ahead of Michael Jordan, I forget now. They ended up trading
It went Olajuwon, Sam Bowie, Jordan.
Okay, that's the draft that it was. So they would have had that pick that the Blazers had, but they traded that pick 3 years previously for Tom Owens just to save money, and that's kind of where that team was at that point. So they've done a good job of being a consistent playoff team, pretty much since the 90s. But the last couple of years, like you said, it's been rough. It's been hard to kind of watch them play basketball just because they haven't been very good. But this season feels different.
Yeah, and first off, a few things there. Slick Leonard, awesome name. If you ever read about like the ABA, which I read the whole like Terry Pluto like oral history of the ABA. Like he's like kind of like a big figure in it, and it's really fun to read that because Indiana was kind of one of the more premier teams of the
Mm.
ABA if you go back all the way that far. If you talk about like Tyrese Haliburton, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I went to Iowa State. I was in Ames while Tyrese Haliburton was playing there, and here's just kind of like a few kind of notes about Haliburton. Um, so he comes in his first year. He's a part of like this really like good draft class. He's or not draft class, recruiting class. And a person who's in the NBA right now was the more coveted, top like 40 recruit or whatever, which is Talon Horton Tucker, aka THT. And Halliburton was on this team. He was I didn't find this out until like after he was drafted. The reason he was only like a 3-star coming out of like Wisconsin was because he really wasn't in like that AAU circuit where he could really kind of get like noticed and like people really couldn't like discover him. And his first year at Iowa State, he played on this team where it was a lot of like ISO scores, and like honestly, like I didn't think he could dribble. Like I'm serious, and that's like just how kind of like an unselfish type of player was. He could obviously dribble. He showed that the next year, and then that's how he became a lottery pick. But like I literally couldn't think he could dribble. And I mean that was kind of maybe like more of one of the more selfish Iowa State teams. Talon Horton Tucker would like to dribble the ball up, shoot a 3-pointer like 10 feet beyond the arc, and then just hit the backboard and no rim. That was kind of how he got drafted. But then he's at Iowa State for a year. The next year, he becomes a guy that like really builds a resume on like a bad Iowa State team. And then if you kind of and a thing that's really kind of like interesting for me is I watch him, and I was thinking about this today before we started recording, thinking back to him at Iowa State. He's not necessarily like he's a very unselfish basketball player where if you look like he's leading the league in assists, he's averaging like 26 points right now, but he's really really lower in like usage. Like I think he's like 43rd in usage, and if you look at the other guys that are like top 10 in assists, all of them are like top 20 in usage. And I just think like having a piece like this, he's a Midwest kid. He obviously from Wisconsin went to Iowa State. I think this, unlike maybe like a Paul George, is I know you obviously need to take care of your star to make him want to stay, but I think Tyrese Haliburton wants to build something in Indiana, and I think that's something that's really good for a Pacers franchise that does have a lot of like mixed history, a lot of unfortunate history, but a team that we want to in a state that like we want to see that really cares about basketball.
No, I mean those are all great points, and I would just touch on what you talked about there with Tyrese. Like he has embraced Indiana. After the game, I think somebody asked him against the Lakers. Somebody asked him about, you know, getting players to come to Indiana to play with him, and he said, "Well, he said I'm here basically. I'm showcasing everything I'm doing right now. You want to come play here? You want to play with me? This is the style I play." But he said, "I'm gonna be here," and he was talking about being in Indiana because he loves the small market. He grew up being a Milwaukee Bucks fan. He understands the ins and outs of being a small market and kind of the struggles that come with it. But he also got a chance to see, right, how Giannis was able to kind of turn Milwaukee from being a small market team to a destination place, and that's where we see like a Damian Lillard go there, a Drew Holiday gets traded there. So I think that he's kind of like tuned out all the noise around like, oh, you got to be a big market to recruit players to Indiana. I still think that is going to be a little bit of a factor, but the more he ascends into the limelight, as he kind of climbs the ranks of where he's at in terms of like upper echelon of where he is tier wise on those top 10, top 5, top 20, wherever you want to put him in that group, as he keeps ascending in that category, players are going to notice. And I think that he plays such an unselfish style of play that guys are going to feast. And so, it's one of those things where he's learning how to balance that scoring and that passing every single season. It seems like he's gotten better at that, knowing when to turn it on as a scorer versus when to be a facilitator. But yeah, I think that Tyrese Haliburton is in a great spot, especially with how much the Pacers have prioritized him. So his family is beloved here, and I think Rob Mahoney did an excellent piece from the ringer.com talking about Tyrese Haliburton and his family. But the one thing that I noticed, we had Rob Mahoney on our podcast, and one of the things he talked about was just like it's not just how Tyrese treats the players, it's how his parents treat the other players' parents and their family. It's just like they are like the player parent personnel lead, and then you've got all the great coaching staff there as well as the front office. So I just think it's a really good fit.
And just getting back to like his style of play is like he doesn't take bad shots. And that's part of the reason if you look at like his numbers, he's just like an incredibly like overly like efficient player. And I was kind of thinking about like the Pacers and you can talk about ceiling or whatever this year. I think getting to the playoffs and then showing some fight in the playoffs would be a very good season for you guys this year. And I was kind of thinking about like the team that you guys have and how it's built. And you look at like the team right now, it's number one in pace, and I'm trying to figure out if like that is the best way, going forward past this season to like really build this team as kind of like a really fast up and down team. And are they doing that because that's like the best way for them to win? Or is that maybe a way for them to cover up for maybe some like kind of defensive weaknesses on the team? Because I thought the Lakers were going to win that game just because you guys really don't have like that kind of like really talented, not talented, but that kind of like you're kind of a small team. Like you
Yeah,
guys are having like Obi Toppin or Aaron Nesmith kind of guard like Giannis and LeBron.
yeah, no, that's a good observation, and obviously the Pacers want to play fast. It's not just because it's what they are best at, but that is part of the case. But they built their team around playing fast, and they completely changed their offense to playing fast when Tyrese got traded here. Now, one thing I'm sure you've noticed when Tyrese gets the ball, before he even gets the ball from the inbound pass, he's looking up court to see if there's anybody open. He's constantly keeping his eyes ahead, and they just want to play a super fast pace because it's going to wear guys out. Obviously, the Lakers did a heck of a job in the championship game with just slowing the game down. The referees called a ton of fouls. I think there was actually like 58 to 60 fouls called in that game. And to me, that was a little bit boring because it just kind of took away the flow of the game. But, the Lakers, their size was able to kind of disrupt everything because they are long and they've got wings at like one through five, especially if you take D'Angelo Russell out there and you throw LeBron at the point. Now they're just really, really big, and there's not a lot of teams built like that. But because of their speed, they're able to beat teams like Milwaukee, right? They're able to put Brook Lopez in a pick and roll situation and get the slow footed guy switched on to Halliburton where he can go right by him, or they can push the ball up and get an alley oop to Obi Toppin right after a Bucks made basket just because, hey, in 2 seconds we can be down the floor. So it definitely is part of like how they're built. But at the same time, I think that's the style they prefer to play. I do agree with you, though. Like when they do get into those matchups, when it's going to be a rock fight, when they're going to have to bang down low and go toe to toe with a guy like Anthony Davis, they've got to find another way to win besides just playing fast. So that is where there is a little bit of concern because I do think, as much as I love Aaron Nesmith and how much he has developed since being here, 6'5" guy is not going to be able to be your long-term option at the 3 or the 4. Like, yeah, you may be able to play some 3, but like playing him at the 4 against Davis or LeBron on a night-to-night basis, like that's just a lot to ask of him. So I do think that they need to address their size issue and maybe try to like find a little bit more of a defensive-minded guy.
As far as like roster construction this year, I think that like this team should just kind of like, unless something like just falls into their lap, just kind of like stay pat, stay as it is. You have this fun young team, everyone's having fun, everyone's kind of playing together. Like don't ruin it. I think sometimes there's some teams that just move on like too fast. I thought Minnesota might have done that with like when they traded for Gobert, but I mean this year they've really kind of turned the corner, so maybe I'm a little bit wrong on that.
I think
OKC.
everybody is on that one.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of the surprise of the season, I think. Um, but you kind of want to see too what like Walker does if he can develop, get a little bit more playing time, and if Benedict Mathurin's in his second year, maybe he can develop into more of like a quality, starish level kind of player. You're going to be doing this on your podcast tomorrow, so I'm going to assume, or I'm going to uh, tell everyone here that's listening, make sure you go and watch his. You guys like talk about this, and I wanted to play a similar kind of game to what you're doing. And basically, I'm gonna have like a list of like how many do I have here? I've got like 8 or 9 players here, and I
Okay.
want you to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 of your interest level in either the Pacers, trying to sign for them or possibly trade for them. I'm gonna start off with uh, maybe the least interesting in my opinion, and then uh, go up to like maybe the more interesting and maybe less attainable, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Um, All right. So scale to 1 to 10. This is a player on the island of misfit toys. One of there's like maybe like 3 or 4 teams that just have like are just kind of a mess right now. And that player is Kyle Kuzma on the Washington Wizards, scale of 1 to 10.
Scale of 1 to, so am I ranking all the players in order, or are we just doing like
No,
how I
just
would?
like you can like they could all be sevens if you want.
Okay, Kuzma, I would do like at a 4.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like maybe you get some of those like forward type players because that's kind of like the position that I think you're maybe missing a little bit.
Yeah,
Kuzma, definitely a guy that likes to shoot,
yeah. I
loves
mean,
to.
I think he could fit with the Pacers. I actually made this case last year on one of our episodes, and I think that when he was with the Lakers when they won the championship, he was actually really good defensively.
He
You go to
was.
Washington and becomes kind of the guy offensively, but like look at Washington. They're in a complete rebuild now, and he's got to share the basketball with Jordan Poole. And I mean, nobody's really keeping an eye on what they're doing. So I would say like Kuzma could probably benefit from a new home. And I actually think that Indiana wouldn't be the worst destination for him. I just don't think he really moves the needle that much.
Okay, next one. Another player that's on a team with a bunch of misfit toys, DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, I'm out on DeRozan. I would say probably right around a 3. I just think that DeRozan doesn't play the style the Pacers play. A little bit slower, kind of mucks things up a little bit. He's more of a mid-range guy. He's one of an old school player. Like I don't think he would benefit from playing fast. The Pacers could use a scorer like that to get them a bucket to help Tyrese out. I get that point, and I would argue that if I was trying to make the case for it. But I just don't think he fits the style, specifically with how many guards and players already have that they're trying to get minutes to.
Yeah, I don't know what because he's probably going to get traded. I just don't know what team will like trade for him. Where he said like my preferred destinations. I think he said were like Miami and New York. It's like
Yeah,
Demar, you're not at the stage of your career where you could have preferred destinations. You're going to go to Utah. You're going to go Utah, or maybe you go back to San Antonio because they need to kind of figure some things out. All
yeah.
right, then
I could see the Lakers trading for him. I could.
the Lakers shouldn't do that. The Lakers should not
He's
bundle
on an
together
expiring
three to
contract.
yeah, they shouldn't bundle together three pieces for one though. They should have learned their lesson from Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
Uh, Next one, scale of 1 to 10. Fun fact about this player: it's Desmond Bain, and once upon a time, these two players, Tyrese Haliburton and Desmond Bain, played their last college game against each other.
Interesting.
2020 Big 12 tournament, and then COVID happened and ended the tournament. What would you rate your scale 1 to 10? Desmond Bain. Here, this is the last point I'll add. Desmond Bain. You know the Grizzlies right now, kind of having like this mess of a season. Maybe they kind of want to maybe rebuild, try and tank a little bit this season since Ja's out for the first 25 games.
Yeah. So I'm going to put an 8 just because I think he's that talented of a player. I don't necessarily love the fit though because of the same reason we already have so many guards and he's a bit undersized. But I'll just say 8 because I think he's talented enough that I would be interested. I just don't know if the fit really makes a ton of sense and what you're having to give up for him. So, in terms of like where I'd rank him, I guess you could say like I'm pretty intrigued by Desmond Bain becoming available. I think he's another great shot maker that would. We've already seen how well he fits in with Jaw. I don't think he would have a problem fitting with Tyrese. But does he step on the toes of Benedict Mathurin? Do you have to trade Benedict Mathurin to get him? Is that worth the trade? Don't know.
Yeah. All right. This next player, this guy is like right now he's at the bar. He's trying to talk to everyone, trying to get somebody to take him home, trying to get someone to get a number, trying to get somebody to bite him. And that player is Pascal Siakam on the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one a 10. I think Pascal Siakam actually is the kind of the perfect fit for the Pacers. What they need a power forward. They need someone that can defend down low. He's an NBA champion. He's been a 2-time All NBA kind of guy, multiple time All Star. If the Pacers can get someone like that, I understand he's on an expiring contract. But with that being an expiring contract, could that mean that his asking price is less than what it would have been a couple of years ago? I think so. And if he walks in free agency, I think that there's a better chance of the Pacers re-signing him if they trade for him than if they just try to go out and get him in free agency. Because I think just getting him into the building, letting him experience what this team is all about, it's going to make it easier for him. And then, little fun fact for you there: Andrew Nimhard's agent, Jafar Chufani, is the same agent as Pascal Siakam, and they don't have a huge group of players, but I do think that Pascal coming to Indy potentially with an Andrew Nimhard could be really interesting.
That is interesting. All right, I wasn't expecting a full out 10 on that one.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, now here these next few are kind of like I think these are a little bit kind of like out there where it's like if you get the Woj bomb that this happens, like it comes out of nowhere and it's not no one is expecting it. First one here, Mikal Bridges, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
He's kind of the number one option that team now, but I think we realize that like if Mikal Bridges is your number one option, you're maybe winning like 33 games.
Yeah, so I'm going to give this one an 11. uh, yeah, this one's better than Pascal Siakam to me, just because of the age. 27 years old, plays the small forward position. I think that they could really use a 3-and-D type that fits what they're trying to do. He's obviously good friends with Tyrese Haliburton. They were on Team USA together this past summer, so I definitely think that that's a perfect fit if they could get Mikal Bridges, and I think they did try to go after him a little bit when it was when he was traded last year from Phoenix to Brooklyn, but I don't think he's going anywhere, and that's what makes it kind of hard because it's just like I don't feel like realistically the Brooklyn Nets would give up on him so quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also think a little bit of more of a minor piece that would be nice for you guys would be like Dorian Finney-Smith from that team.
For
I
sure.
really liked him. Yeah, I really liked him on Dallas. All right,
I was
now we're
I
getting
was pushing that one actually a little bit. I was like, they need to do it in the offseason. I'm like, Obi Toppin's fine, but like, let's get a defensive minded guy that can actually make threes at a better rate. I know Dorian Finney Smith kind of wore out a little bit in Dallas just because I think his role, like he was really good the year before, and then he kind of like took a step back. But I think that he's more of a role player than he is anything else. But I like his fit. I think he'd be a good fit with the Pacers.
he'd be like this is like Luca, but like a lot more fun.
And not as much complaining about fouls, right?
Exactly. All right, now this would be like a really, really big one. And this isn't one that would happen during the season. This would be something if the Boston Celtics, if they either flame out in like the second round against Milwaukee or something, or, losing the conference finals to an 8 seed Miami again. Jaylen Brown just signed like the super big max extension. If Boston doesn't do it this year, they're going to be kind of sitting back, be like, what do we do now? What would
Good question. I'm going to probably go 9 here for Jaylen Brown. I think that, you obviously know he can be a number 2 guy. That's a bottom line. I definitely think that the contract is a little bit like, okay, is that the guy we want to go all in on for
Yeah.
our big contract next to Tyrese? Question mark. He doesn't really play the position the Pacers, I think, need to address the most either, which is the front court. So he's a really good basketball player though, and he's got the experience. So I wouldn't want to like undersell him as a player, but I'll just say 9 because I mean, if he becomes available, I don't think anybody would be upset if the Pacers made a deal to go out there and get him, depending on what they gave up. And if they had to give up too much to get him, then I think they might be. I think they might be kicking themselves. But like he's really good. He's a really good scorer. I think he could be a great number 2 next to Tyrese. But the big question is, would he embrace being the number 2 guy, or does he get kind of frustrated with how much he's already been in the shadows of a guy like Jason Tatum, where he's like, you know what, I want to be a number 1 guy.
All right, this next one is this one is probably I think it'll be kind of around these like or maybe a little bit lower than the last 3 that we said. Um this player is playing out on the Western Conference right now. His team just traded for a new star, and I could very much see that after a year of this Clippers experiment that people just seem to like really just if things don't go on the postseason, really seem to get rubbed the wrong way by James Harden, and that's why I'm going to ask you: what about Paul George, player option after this year? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I would probably put him in like that 8 to 9 range as well. I still think that he's got good basketball left in him, but he is 33 years old, which is a little bit older, and he's played a lot of good basketball. I think he would be okay with playing under Tyrese. Like he has openly said that he's fine being the Robin to someone's Batman. We've already seen that with how he went with Kawhi Leonard and kind of like lets him be the number 1 alpha. So I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just wonder like how long would that deal be, and is he still going to play at the same level we're used to seeing him play? I think it would be a great redemption story for him to come back to Indiana and help them get back to the playoffs with Tyrese Haliburton. It'd be really cool. I think fans would actually that were out on Paul George would be very excited about it. And I think he seems like he's in good shape still, and he's playing great basketball. So not too worried about it. But if you sign him to like a 4 or 5 year deal, like are you really wanting to pay that guy max money at 37, 38, probably not. That's a little too much. So I think that you definitely dip your toe in the pool and kind of see and feel it out before you jump all in. But I would definitely be interested.
Paul's best basketball of his career, it actually is kind of when he is the number one option, where
Yeah.
like that best run that they had with the Clippers is like when Kawhi went out, and then like Paul like really kind of stepped his game up another level. It was in OKC when like when Westbrook was like, all right, Paul, you're like the number one. It was in Indiana at the start of his career, and I think Tyrese Haliburton, as we were saying earlier, unselfish player, doesn't necessarily have the ball a lot in his hands, but is a very much like a distributing type player. I think Paul George would be an awesome fit there. All right.
Mhm.
Um, we'll do this one since we don't have much time left here. I'll just do an either or of this one because these guys are on the same team, and they kind of seem like they're stuck in the mud. They're stuck in neutral. The New Orleans Pelicans, they have two stars that are forwards right now. They have Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram. Which one would you just rather have?
I This is tough. I've had this conversation actually with friends before, and I think I would lean Brandon Ingram just because I can rely on him a little bit more to bring it every night. And I think Zion at his best would be a much better pick here. I just think with the weight though with Zion, you have to worry about the injuries that he's had already in his career. I personally believe that Rick Carlisle would be able to try to like coach Zion the right way and try to help him get on a not trying to body shame here, but just like a weight management type of thing and try to help him get his body in game shape like it needs to be because there's no way that he's gonna ever be able to overcome all the injuries that he's had if he continues to just not care about his weight. So I think he's a great player. We saw him put 36 points up. We're recording this on a Tuesday night. Monday night, he put 36 points up. And I think that, he's heard a lot of stuff about the body shaming and stuff like that. So I do buy into it a little bit. He just needs to lose some weight and get in game shape just for his health and for his longevity of his career. But Brandon Ingram has been really good. And so I think the Pacers could just use someone like any kind of wing scorer would be huge for the Pacers.
Yeah, I with Zion, I just don't. I'm not sure what type of player he like is in like a winning situation because it seems like he needs the ball in his hands, but then
True.
it's like he can't really spread the floor. And then defensively, he's like can kind of handle some people in the post, but he's like pretty short. He's kind of still lost that athletic burst. I agree with you. I think I'd probably like Brandon Ingram. He's able to kind of be that like hybrid 3-4. You don't have to worry him as much on defense. Can spread the floor a little bit with his shooting. And he's also a guy, late game, if you need a bucket, he's a guy that you can get the ball in his hands and he can try and create something.
Mhm.
Alex, we're out of time here tonight. Why don't you tell us where we can find all of your work and then we'll head out of here.
Yeah, I want to thank you for having me on the show. It was a good time chatting with you about basketball in general and some of these players on the Pacers too. So, if you're a Pacer fan or if you're just an NBA fan and you want to follow my work, you can find me on Twitter at Alex Golden NBA. I've got a podcast called Setting the Pace, which we have pretty much out. We have episodes out daily for that, so you're looking 5-6 episodes a week. And then we also have, and then I also am I'm a writer too. I have my own blog called theblueandgolden.substack.com. I try to do 10 thoughts on every game and kind of break down what I saw. And sometimes I'll dive into the weeds a little bit and put some film up and kind of show you what stood out to me and maybe why a player got pulled out of the game if you don't understand what happened or whatnot. But I just try to break down things and showcase things every once in a while like that. But other times I just write little things down that are important and little nuggets that people might not know about. So with that being said, I really want to thank you, James, again for having me on. And it was fun to do this.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. It was a lot of fun.